Okay. When Shukracharya gave Devayani in marriage to Yayati, he had Sarmista go with her, but he warned the king, my dear king, never allow this girl, Sarmista, to lie with you in your bed.
Hmm.
Well, believe me, that's going to be not followed completely. Text 31. O King Parikshit, upon seeing Devayani with a nice son, Sar, Sarmista once approached King Yayati at the appropriate time for conception in a secluded place. She requested the king, the husband of her friend Devayani, to enable her to have a son also. Oh boy, that's going to be a problem. Text 32. When Princess Sarmista begged King Yayati for a son, this king was certainly aware of the principles of religion, and therefore he agreed. Therefore, he uh, agreed to fulfill her desire. Although he remembers the warning of Sukracharya, he thought of this union as the desire of the Supreme, and thus he had sex with Sarmista. Sarmista. Purport. King Yayati was completely aware of the duty of a Kshatriya. When a Kshatriya is approached by a woman, he cannot deny her. This is the religious principle. Consequently, when Dar- Dharma Raja Yudhishthira saw Arjuna unhappy after Arjuna returned from Dwarka, he asked whether Arjuna had refused a woman who had begged for a son. Although Maharaj Yayati remembered Shukracharya's warning, he could not refuse Sarvista. He thought it was wise to give her a son, and thus he had sexual intercourse with her after her menstrual period. This kind of lust is not against religious principles, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.11. Dharma viruddho vitesu kamo me. Sex life not contrary to the principles of religion is sanctioned by Krishna. Because Sarmista, the daughter of the king, had begged Yayati for a son, their combination was not lust, but an act of religion. Okay. Text 33. Devayani gave birth to Yadu and Turvasa, and Sarmista gave birth to Duryu, Anu, and Puru. Text 34. When the proud Devayani understood from outside sources that Sarmista was pregnant by her husband, she was frenzied with anger. Thus she departed for her father's home. Yeah, her father's going to do something really bad. Text 35. 35, yeah. So King Yayati, who was very lusty, followed his wife, caught her, and tried to appease her by speaking pleasing words and massaging her feet, but he could not satisfy her by any means. Text 36. Shukracharya was extremely angry. You untruthful fool, lusting after women, you have done a great wrong, he said. I therefore curse you to be attacked and disfigured by old age and invalidity. Right. Text 37. King Yayati said, O learned, worshipable Brahmana, I have not yet satisfied my lusty desires with your daughter. Sukracharya then replied, you may exchange your old age with someone who will agree to transfer his youth to you. Purport. When King Yayati said that he had not yet satisfied his lusty desires with Sukracharya's daughter, Sukracharya saw that it was against the interest of his own daughter for Yayati to continue in old age and invalidity, for certainly his lusty daughter would not be satisfied. Therefore, Sukracharya blessed his son-in-law by saying that he could exchange his old age for someone else's youth. He indicated that if Yayati's son would exchange his youth for Yayati's old, I'm sorry, if Yayati's son would exchange his youth for Yayati's old age, Yayati could continue to enjoy sex with Devayani. Text 38. When Yayati received this benediction from Sukracharya, he requested his eldest son, my dear son, Yadu, please give me your youth in exchange for my old age and invalidity. Text 39. My dear son, I am not yet satisfied in my sexual desires, but if you are kind to me, you can take the old age given by your material grandfather, and I may take your youth, so that I may enjoy life for a few years more. What a stupid desire. Purport. This is the nature of lusty desires. The Bhagavad Gita 7:20. It is said, Star Krita Jnana. When one is too attached to sense gratification, he actually loses his sense. The word Krita Jnana refers to one who has lost his sense. Here is an example. The father shamelessly asked his son to exchange youth for old age. Of course, the entire world is under such illusion. Therefore, it is said that everyone is pramata, or exclusively mad. Nunan pramata kurute vikarma. When one becomes almost like a madman, he indulges in sex and sense gratification. Sex and sense gratification can be controlled, however, and one can be controlled, however, and one achieves perfection when he has no desires for sex. This is possible only when one is fully in Krishna conscious. Yad Yadavadi Mama Chetache Krishna Padaravinde Nava Rasa Dhamani Udyatam Rantum Asit Tada Vadi Bata Nari Sangame Smarya Mane Bhavati Mukha Vikara Shustu Nishti Vanan Cha. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing every new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with taste. Sexual desire can be stopped only when one is fully Krishna conscious, and not otherwise. As long as one has desires for sex, one must change his body and transmigrate from one body to another to enjoy each sex in different species or forms. But although the forms may, I'm sorry, but although the forms may differ, the business of sex is the same. Therefore, it is said, punas charvita charvananam. Those who are very much attached to sex transmigrate from one body to another with the same business of chewing the chewed, tasting sex enjoyment as a dog, sex enjoyment as a hog, sex enjoyment as a demigod, and so on. Well, text 40. Yadu replied, my dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and invalidity. For unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Interesting. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal. human life. Therefore, the Varnashrama institution is most scientific. It aims at giving one the facility to return home back to Godhead, which one cannot do without completely renouncing all connections with the material world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Niskinchana Ganasya Bhagavat Vajanon Mukasya. One who wants to go back home, back to Godhead, must be Niskinchana, free from all affinity for material enjoyment. Brahmani Upa Samasrayam. Unless one is fully renounced, one cannot engage in devotional service or stay in Brahman. Devotional service is rendered on the Brahman platform. Therefore, unless one attains the Brahman platform or spiritual platform, one cannot engage in devotional service. Or, in other words, a person engaged in devotional service is already on the Brahman platform. Mam chayo vibhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Okay, very good. Bhagavad Gita 14:26. If one attains devotional service, therefore he is certainly liberated. Generally, unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Varnashrama, therefore, gives the opportunity for gradual elevation. Yadu, the son of Maharaj Yayati, explained that he was unable to give up the youth, for he wanted to use it to attain the renounced order in the future. Maharaj Yadu was different from his brothers, as stated in the next verse. Maharaj Yadu, okay. As stated in the next verse, Durvasu, Jodita, Picture, Drew, sorry, Drew Hughes, Chanus Cha Bharata, Pratya Chakuru, Ad Maja, Maharaj Yadu's brothers refused to accept their father's proposal because they were not completely aware of Dharma. To accept orders that follow religious principles, especially the orders of one's father, is very important. Therefore, when the brothers of Maharaj Yadu refused their father's order, this was certainly irreligious. Maharaj Yadu's Maharaj Yadu's refusal, however, was religious, as stated in the 10th canto, Yados Cha Dharma Silasya. Maharaj Yadu was completely aware of the principles of religion. The ultimate principle of religion is to engage oneself in devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was very eager to engage himself in the Lord's service, but there was an impediment. During youth, the material desire to enjoy the material senses is certainly present. And unless one fully satisfies these lusty desires in youth, there is a chance of one being disturbed in rendering service to the Lord. We, we have actually seen that many sannyasis who accept sannyasa prematurely, not having satisfied their material desires, fall down because they are disturbed.
Hmm.
Therefore, the general process is to go through grihastha life and vanaprastha life, and finally come to sannyasa, and devote oneself completely to the service of the Lord. Maharaja Yadu was ready to accept his father's order and exchange youth for old age because he was confident that the youth taken by his father would be returned. But because this exchange would delay his complete engagement in devotional service, he did not want to accept his father's old age, for he was eager to achieve freedom from disturbances. Moreover, among the descendants of Yadu would be Lord Krishna. Therefore, because Yadu was eager to see the Lord's appearance in his dynasty as soon as possible, Yadu refused to accept his father's proposal. This was not irreligious. However, because Yadu's purpose was to serve the Lord, because Yadu was a faithful servant of the Lord, Lord Krishna appeared in his dynasty, as confirmed in the prayers of Kunti. Yado Priyas Yan Vav Ajay.
Why?
Uh,
Priyas.
Priyas Priyas Yan Vaye. Yadu was very dear to Krishna, who was therefore eager to descend in Yadu's dynasty. In conclusion, Maharaj Yadu should not be considered adharma jana, ignorant of religious principles. As the next verse designates his brothers. He was like the four Sanakas, Chatu Sana, who refused the order of their father, Brahma, for the sake of a better cause. Because the four Kumaras wanted to engage themselves completely in the service of the Lord, as brahmacharis, their refusal to obey their father's order was not irreligious. Text 41. O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati similarly requested his sons, Turvasa, Dhruhyu, and Anu, to engage their youth for his old age. But because they were unaware of religious principles, they thought that their flickering youth was eternal, and therefore they refused to carry out their father's order. Text 42. King Gayatri then requested Puru, who was younger than these three brothers, but more qualified. My dear son, do not be disobedient like your elder brother, for that is not your duty. Text 43. Buddha replied, O your majesty, who in this world can repay his debt to his father. By the mercy of one's father, one gets the human form of life, which can enable one to become an associate of the Supreme Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Father gives the seed of the body, and this seed gradually grows and develops until one ultimately attains the developed human body with consciousness higher than that of the animals. In the human body, one can be elevated to the higher plane. And furthermore, if one cultivates Krishna consciousness, one can return home back to God. This important human body is obtained by the grace of the Father, and therefore everyone is indebted to his Father. Of course, in other lives, one also gets a father and mother. Even cats and dogs have fathers and mothers. But in the human form of life, the father and mother can award their son the greatest benediction by teaching him to become a devotee. When one becomes a devotee, he achieves the greatest benediction because he completely averts the repetition of birth and death. Therefore, the father who trains his child in Krishna consciousness is the most benevolent father in this world. It is said, Janame Janame Sabe Pita Matapaya. Krishna Guru Nahi Mile Bhaja Hari E. Everyone gets a father and mother, but if one gets the benediction of Krishna and Guru, he can conquer material nature and return home back to Godhead. Text 44. A son who acts by anticipating what his father wants him to do is first class. One who acts upon receiving his father's order is second class. And one who executes his father's order irreverently is third class. But a son who refuses his father's order is like his father's stool. Oh boy.
I think this is the verse to share with our kids.
Yeah. Stool. Who refuses his father's order is like his father's stool. Purport. Puru, Yayati's last son, immediately accepted his father's proposal. For although he was the youngest, he was very qualified. Puru thought, I should have accepted my father's proposal before he asked, but I did not. Therefore, I am not a first-class son. I am second class, but I do not wish to become the lowest type of son, who is compared to his father's stool. One Indian poet has spoken of putra and mutra. Putra means son, and mutra means urine. Both a son and urine come from the same genitals. If a son is an obedient devotee of the Lord, he is called putra, or a real son. Otherwise, if he is not learned and is not a devotee, a son is nothing better than urine. Oh boy. Text 45. Sukadeva Goswami said in this way, O Maharaj Parikshit, the son named Puru was very pleased to accept the old age of his father, Yayati, who took the youth of his son and enjoyed this material world as he required. Text 46. Thereafter, King Yayati became the ruler of the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, and ruled the citizens exactly like a father. Oh, well, that's good. Because he had taken the youth of his son, his senses were unimpaired, and he enjoyed as much material happiness as he desired. Text 47. In secluded places, engaging her mind, words, body, and various paraphernalia, Devayani, the dear wife of Maharaj Yayati, always brought her husband the greatest possible transcendental bliss. Text 48. King Yayati performed various sacrifices in which he offered abundant gifts to the Brahmanas to satisfy the Supreme Lord Hari, who is the reservoir of all demigods and the object of all Vedic knowledge. Text 49. Supreme Lord Vasudeva, who created the cosmic manifestation, exhibits himself as all-pervading, like the sky that holds the clouds. And when the creation is annihilated, everything enters into the Supreme Lord Krishna, and varieties are no longer manifested. Purport question of Prabhupada. As stated by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 7.19. Vahanam janmanam ante janavan mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlava. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, is one with the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Absolute Truth. Everything is in him in the beginning, and at the end, all manifestations enter into him. He is situated in everyone's heart. Sarvasya Chaham Pridisani Vista. And from him, everything has emanated. Janmada Saryata. All material manifestations, however, are temporary. The world swapna means dreams. Maya means illusion, and Manobrata means mental creations. Dreams, illusions, and mental creations are temporary. Similarly, all material creation is temporary. But Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the eternal absolute truth. Text 50. Without material desires, Maharaj Jayati worshiped the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart as Narayana and is invisible to material eyes, although existing everywhere. Purport. King Jayati, although extremely although externally seeming very fond of material enjoyment, was internally thinking of becoming an eternal servant of the Lord. Text 51. Although Maharaj Yayati was the king of the entire world, and he engaged his mind and five senses in enjoying material possessions for 1,000 years, he was unable to be satisfied. Purport. The Kad Indriya, or unpurified senses, can be purified if one engages the senses and the mind in Krishna consciousness. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatmena nirmalam. One must be freed from all designation. When one identifies himself with the material world, his senses are impure. But when one achieves spiritual realization and identifies himself as a servant of the Lord, his senses are purified immediately. Engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord is called bhakti. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. One may enjoy the senses for many thousands of years, but unless one purifies the senses, one cannot be happy. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports of the ninth canto, 18th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled King Yayati Regains His Youth. Okay, so now we're going to chapter 19. King Yayati achieves liberation. This 19th chapter describes how Maharaj Yayati achieved liberation after he recounted the figurative story of the he-goat and the she-goat. After many, many years of sexual relationships and enjoyment in the material world, King Yayati finally became disgusted with such materialistic happiness. When satiated with material enjoyment, he devised the story of a he-goat and she-goat, corresponding to his own life, and narrated the story before his beloved Devayani. The story is as follows. Once upon a time, while a goat was searching in a forest for different types of vegetables to eat, by chance he came to a well in which he saw a she-goat. He became attracted to this she-goat and somehow or other delivered her from the well. And thus they were united. They were united. One day after, when the she-goat saw the he-goat enjoying sex with another she-goat, she became angry, abandoned the he-goat, and returned to her Brahmana owner, to whom she described her husband's behavior. The Brahmana became very angry and cursed the he-goat to lose his sexual power. Thereupon, the he-goat begged the Brahmana's pardon and was given back the power for sex. Then the he-goat, enjoyed sex with the she-goat for many years, but still he was not satisfied. If one is lusty and greedy, even the total stock of gold in this world cannot satisfy one's lusty desires. Wow, what a statement. These desires are like fire, like a fire. One may pour clarified butter on a blazing fire, but one cannot expect the fire to be extinguished. To extinguish such a fire, one must adopt a different process. The Shastra therefore advises that by intelligence one renounce the life of enjoyment. Without great endeavor, those with a poor fund of knowledge cannot give up such enjoyment, especially in relation to sex, because a beautiful woman bewilders even the most learned man. King Yayati, however, renounced worldly life and divided his property among his sons. He personally adopted the life of a mendicant or sannyasi, giving up all attraction to material enjoyment, and engaged himself fully in devotional service to the Lord. Thus he attained perfection. Later, when his beloved wife Devayani was freed from her mistaken way of life, she also engaged herself in the devotional service of the Lord. Text number 1. Sukadeva Goswami said, O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati was very much attached to women. In due course of time, however, when disgusted with sexual enjoyment and its bad effects, he renounced this way of life and narrated the following story to his beloved wife. Text number 2. My dear beloved wife, daughter of Sukracharya, in this world there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Persons who live in the village or town are called Grama Nivasi, and those who live in the forest are called Vanavasi or Vanaprastha. The Vanaprastha who have retired from family life generally lament about their past human life because it engaged them in trying to fulfill lofty desires. Prahlada Maharaj said that one should retire from family life as soon as possible, and he described family life as the darkest well. Hitvatma patam grinam andakupam.
Hmm.
If one continuously or permanently concentrates on living with his family, he should be understood to be killing himself. In Vedic civilization, therefore, it is recommended that one retire from family at the end of his 50th year and go to Vana, the forest, when he becomes expert or accustomed to forest life or retired and retired
Life.
life as a vanaprastha, he should accept sannyasa. Vanam gato yad dharin ashrayeta. Sannyasa means accepting unavoided engagement in the service of the Lord. Vedic civilization therefore recommends 4 different stages of life: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa. One should be very much ashamed of remaining a householder and not promoting himself to the 2 higher stages, namely vanaprastha and sannyasa.
Hmm.
Text number 3. While wandering in the forest, eating to satisfy his senses, a he-goat by chance approached a well in which he saw a she-goat standing helplessly, having fallen into it by the influence of the results of prudent activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here, Maharaj Yayati compares himself to a he-goat and Devayani to a she-goat, and describes the nature of man and woman. Like a he-goat, a man searches for sense gratification, wandering here and there, and a woman without the shelter of a man or husband is like a she-goat that has fallen into a well. Without being cared for by a man, a woman cannot be happy. Indeed, she is just like a she-goat that has fallen into a well and is struggling for existence. Therefore, a woman must take shelter of a father. as Devyani did when under the care of Sukracharya. And then the father must give the daughter in charity to a suitable man, or a suitable man should help the woman by placing her under the care of a husband. This is shown vividly by the life of Devayani. When King Yayati delivered Devayani from the well, she felt great relief and requested Yayati to accept her as his wife. But when Maharaj Yayati accepted Devayani, he became too attached and had sex life, not only with her, but with others, like Sarmista. Yet still he was dissatisfied. Therefore, one should retire by force from such family life as Yayati's. When one is fully convinced of the degrading nature of worldly family life, one should completely renounce this way of life, take sannyasa, and engage himself fully in the service of the Lord, when one's life will be successful. Text 4. After planning how to get the she goat out of the well, the lusty he goat dug up the earth on the well's edge with the point of his horns in such a way that she was able to come out very easily. Purport. Attraction for woman is the impetus for economic development. Housing and many other things meant for living comfortably in this material world. Digging up the earth to make a way out for the she goat was a laborious task. But before accepting the she goat, the he goat underwent this labor. Aho griha chetra sutabda vitaya janasya mohayam aham nameti. The union between male and female provides the impetus for gaining a nice apartment, a good income, children, and friends. Thus, one becomes entangled in this material world. Text number 5 and 6. When the he goats, who had very nice hips, got out of the well and saw the very handsome, when the she goats, who had very nice hips, got out of the well and saw the very handsome he goat, she desired to accept him as her husband. When she did so, many other she goats also desired him as their husband, because he had a very beautiful bodily structure and a nice mustache. Yeah, the goats had a nice mustache and beard, and was expert in discharging semen and in the art of sexual intercourse. Therefore, just as a person haunted by a ghost exhibits madness, the best of the he goats, attracted by the many she goats, engaged in erotic activities and naturally forgot his real business of self realization. That's how dangerous illicit sex is. It can make you forget everything spiritual and engage only in sense gratification and erotic activities. Purport. Materialists are very much attracted by sexual intercourse. Yan maitunadi grinamedi sukam cham. Although one becomes a grihasta or householder to enjoy sex life to his heart's content, one is never satisfied. Such a lusty materialist is like a goat, for it is said that if goats meant for slaughter get the opportunity, they enjoy sex before being killed. Human beings, however, are meant for self-realization. Tapodivyam putrika yena sarvam sudayed yasmad brahmasukam tva tva anantam. Human life is meant for realization of the self, the spiritual soul within the body. Behinosmin yata dehe. A materialistic rascal does not know that he is not the body, but a spiritual soul within the body. However, one should understand the real position and cultivate knowledge by which to get free from bodily entanglement. Like an unfortunate person who acts madly, haunted by ghosts, a materialist haunted by the ghost of lust forgets his real business so that he can enjoy so called happiness and the bodily concept of life.
And that's a good analogy that as a materialist, we're haunted by this ghost of lust. So we don't know that we are under the control of this ghost.
Yes, true, very true. That's why it says here, like an unfortunate person who acts madly, haunted by ghosts, a materialist haunted by the ghost of lust, forgets his real business so that he can enjoy so called happiness in the bodily concept of life. Wow. Text 7. When the she goat who had fallen into the well saw her husband and saw her beloved goat engaged in sexual affairs with another she goat, she could not tolerate the goat's activities. Comparing human beings to goats. Text 8. Aggrieved by her husband's behavior with another, the she goat thought that the he goat was not actually her friend, but was hard-hearted and was her friend only for the time being. Therefore, because her husband was lusty, she left him and returned to her former maintainer. Purport. The word so you see, even goats they have frustration with lusty people. Purport. The word swaminam is significant. Swami means caretaker or master. Devayani was cared for by Sukracharya before her marriage, and after her marriage she was cared for by Yayati. But here the word swaminam indicates that Devayani left the protection of her husband, Yayati, and returned to her former protector, Sukracharya. Vedic civilization recommends that a woman stay under the protection of a man. During childhood, she should be cared for by her father, in youth, by her husband, and in old age, by a grown son. In any stage of life, a woman should not have independence. Well, there it is. This is going to make all the feminists scream and rage and have rage. During childhood, she should be cared for by her father, in youth by her husband, and in old age by a grown son. In any stage of life, a woman should not have independence. Text 9.
I mean, is it more like the woman should have protection or should not have independence?
And in old age, by a grown son. In any stage of life, a woman should not have independence. Yeah, what's your question?
Prabhupada is actually meaning that independence in this case means like she needs to be protected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always protected. Okay. Yeah. Protected by mother, father, and protected by husband, and protected by son. Being very sorry, the he goat, who was subservient to his wife, followed the she goat on the road and tried his best to flatter her, but he could not pacify her. Text 10. Let's see what time is it. We're almost done.
Yeah, just about. You want to.
The she goat went to the residence of a Brahmana who was the maintainer of another she goat, and that Brahmana angrily cut off the head, the goat's dangling testicles. But at the he goat's request, the Brahmana later rejoined them by the power of mystic yoga. Wow. Cut off the dogs, cut off the poor goats, the uh, sex in testicles. Purport. Here, Sukracharya is figuratively described as the husband of another she goat. This indicates that the relationship between husband and wife in any society, whether higher or lower than human society, is nothing but the same relationship between the he goat and the she goat. For the material relationship between man and woman is one of sex. Yan maitunadi vihame sukam ituksham. Sukracharya was an acharya or expert in family affairs, which involved the transfer of semen from he-goat to she-goat. The words kaschit aja swami expressly indicate herein that Sukracharya was no better than Yayati, for both of them were interested in family affairs, generated by Sukra or semen. Sukracharya first cursed Yayati to become old, so that he could no longer indulge in sex. But when Sukracharya saw that Yayati's emasculation would make his own daughter a victim of punishment, he used his mystic power to restore Yayati's masculinity. Because he used his power of mystic yoga for family affairs and not to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this exercise in the magic of yoga was no better than the affairs of he goats and she goats. Yogic power should properly be used to realize the Supreme Personality of God, as the Lord Himself recommends in Bhagavad Gita 6.47. Yoginam apisarve sam madgatanatratmana shadavam vachate yomam same yuktatamo mata. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. What time is it now?
Yeah, it's 7:35.
Yeah,
We can break here.
I think we'll stop right there. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? So we're at the point where the testicles of the goat have been cut off. But the testicles that have been cut off will be restored. But we'll hear about that tomorrow.
Well,
We can see how the what you would call allegory of the he goat and the she goat refers to human beings who are always engaged in uh, sexual enjoyment. And it only puts them in a position of, let's say, being engaged unnecessarily in illicit sex rather than controlling their senses. Of course, goats, uh, the fact that they're talking about human beings as goats is to show how a human being becomes like an animal when he loses control of himself and thus goes around seeking mates to have sex with. Okay, so we'll end there with what? Uh, with the he goat who has been chasing around for the she goat, and now, but because of that, his testicles were cut off, and now his testicles are going to be restored. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
That's what the material world is like, having your testicles cut off and somehow or other restoring your testicles and so forth, going back and forth, engaging in sex desire that only puts one deep into the sense of material life, not really understanding the goal of material life. The goal of material life is to surrender one's desires for sense gratification and engage in devotional service with love and devotion. But if one simply continues life after life engaged in sexual activities, they're no better than goats. So therefore, there are four-legged goats and two-legged goats.
Hare
Okay, all glories to
Srila
Srila
Prabhupada ki